Good afternoon, Dr. Dodge here. Some of you may recognize this thing. This was my first attempt at a micro machine track, Micro Thunder 1. Well, what I've done is I've prepared a bunch of material. I'm going to build Micro Thunder 2. What we're going to do is we're going to use the foam as the support structure and the road surface. We have legs right here. The thin strips of wood are going to be bonded to the bottom side of the long strip. This assembly here will notch into here, and that top surface is also the road surface. I found with the problem with this is when you treat it like a Hot Wheels car. Get this thing flipped over where I can show you. When you treat it like a Hot Wheels car, they go really fast for a short bit and get very unstable based on track surface. And then you get into the longer flat, and as soon as it gets level, if you went another, like this was probably 2.5 feet longer, 3 foot longer, the cars just come to a stop. In order to solve that, I am taking almost all of that curve out, and I'm going to run the whole track at a downward angle instead. It'll have the foam legs, tab A, slot B construction, where you can set some different heights for the legs, and we'll tune the ability for them to run it. When it's done, it should be a micro machine scale full quarter mile. I've also routed out of the pink foam my catch box. You can see I use a router, well in this case 2 router bits, one to do the bottom and one to do the edges. The edge was a 45 and the bottom one is just made to cut vertically. And I put the router bit in my drill press, and then I move the piece around like this under it, and I set the height of my cut by what the table height in on the drill press is, and never pull the arm down on it. So there's our project for this evening. I'm going to have to use the floor in the kitchen because it's the only place clean enough and flat enough that I can glue this all together. Holes are pre-drilled into pieces of plywood because we're going to use bamboo skewers and toothpicks to harpoon it all together. That's what the best drywall or deck screws for foam that you can imagine. And then after we get it all glued together and firmed up, we'll come back, we'll sand these surfaces, because if you don't sand that surface, nothing will stick to it. And then we're going to go over it with a nice, pretty outer cover. So stay tuned. Well, good evening. Dr. Dodge here. I am fixing to do a giant glue slurry and try to mop this mess together. The piece that stands upright right here will be a leg, as will this one. We're looking right now at the surface that will be the racetrack. It's approximately 9 feet long as it sits on the ground. The 2 pieces will be joined. You can see the double-ended toothpicks. Those will be used along the edges of the seams, very carefully worked their way in to make sure that the edges stay correct. The big skewers will be used both through the holes that are drilled into the plywood pieces, and also as a single piece that goes through here to try to peg that piece. The idea is going to be to glue at least this joint right now and try to hold it together, and as it slowly cures but doesn't cure all the way, to keep adding my panels. The first little wood panel will tuck tight up against that once that thing is moderately stuck together. I may even notch it out slightly just to get it to drop in right. And so on and so forth. And all of those will stack up. The long one will be against the foam, and then the second one is just a secondary reinforcing to cover the overlap joints. And I've also trimmed up the catch box with a couple of cars. The white and blue one is an exact replica, basically, of the car I drive all the time, which is a 2011 Challenger RT with the stripes just like that. Anybody remember this from some of the early videos? Haha. This is the glue I'm going to use. Type Bond, plain old wood glue. If it's too thick, I use Elmer's school glue to thin it so it spreads better. And we'll get into that later when we start coating the sides and reinforcing it. And also to save me from having to paint the floor, because Mrs. Dodge would be very annoyed if I had giant glue globs, I will be using some parchment paper underneath all of the seam places that I glue up and try to assemble. I'll give everybody a rundown tomorrow when it is, because quite honestly I don't even know what I'm going to have to use to try to clamp and hold it without marring. This is my road surface, so I can't screw that thing up at all. I can't put a rubber band around it. It'll make the cars all screwed up when they go past where the rubber band was. So it's going to be a bit interesting. And it's not even flat, because if you can see, it's got a slight curve at the end. So the Micro Machine Track Micro Thunder2, it's going under some glue. So this is our progress so far. I have glued and skewered all of this. It's been sitting for 45 minutes. I have a crappy box over across the top to aid in drying. And if you don't know what that is, that's a dehumidifier. So the air that blows out of that is like zero humidity, and it is the greatest thing for trying to build monstrous structures like this. Oh, our seam looks gorgeous. You can see we have two skewers in the backside, one diagonal and one straight down. We went with 4 toothpicks, 2 on each side, one here and one here, and then on the other side. Kept the seam nice and straight. We didn't worry about heavy gluing, because if you get too much glue all over the place, it actually can warp it. So you're better off in doing even coats on each side to help keep it straight. We're going to come in with industrial paper mache and plate this, but everything looks really good so far, and I believe I'm going to go in and try to spike the boards tonight, because it's gluing up so nice. Good afternoon, Dr. Dodge here. When I left you last night, all this stuff was in pieces. I managed to make the whole spine. Let's see if we can get a good picture from underneath. But you can see the boards that are bonded to it. And we've got our side pieces now fitted. They're not glued in yet. And I've got two good surface coatings right now on top of the foam using Elmer's school glue and acrylic paint. I start with a little bit of black and a bunch of white for the first coat, and keep adding black or white depending, so you can change the color and see when you make sure you've coated everything. Let's see if we can get a good look down the run here though. All the way into the catch box. We have the Jaden Nano Fast and Furious cars, a couple original micro machines on the right, the Mustang and the station wagon, and the other three are the current micro machines, as are most of these. Some of the heavy equipment is the turbo dollar store little stuff, which are actually pretty good. And the next thing that I'm going to do then is I'm going to push these away because they're just hung on skewers, and I'm going to bond these outer edges in. I wanted to bond those in after I got a couple good layers on the surface, because without the sides I could sand it. I was able to sand it using a sanding block, this piece of DA paper on a 2x cut off, and took all of these saw marks out of the top surface. Cars run down it just without a coating, and then I also put orange track, the pieces down there, and was testing the angle, and so from what it is right now, the far end only needs to come up 4 inches, 2 inches, and they'll roll. And so 2 inches to 6 inches with variable steps in between, so you can go from just barely fast to super fast depending upon the cars. So here's the update on the micro machine track. I believe I'm going to put all the videos together then and push it up right now, and put the next level of improvements in a separate video. Thank you for watching. Y'all have a good day. Bye.